In every quiet neighborhood, there are stories that people never expect to hear. Stories that begin like any ordinary day but end in a way that changes everything. On a quiet street lined with maple trees, the residents believed they lived in one of the safest communities in the city. Children rode their bikes freely along the sidewalks. Neighbors greeted each other every morning. Life was calm, predictable, and peaceful. But on a cold autumn morning, that sense of peace was shattered. At exactly 7:42 in the morning, a woman named Linda Harris stepped outside her house to collect the morning newspaper. As she walked down her driveway, something unusual caught her attention. The front door of her neighbor's house was slightly open. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. Perhaps he had stepped outside in a hurry or forgotten to close it properly. But something about the silence inside the house felt strange. Linda had lived next door to Daniel Carter for almost 5 years. Daniel was known to be careful and organized. He was not the type of person who would leave his door open. As Linda slowly approached the house, a sense of unease began to grow. She gently called out his name. There was no response. The house remained completely silent. With growing concern, Linda pushed the door open just enough to look inside. What she saw made her immediately step back in horror. Within minutes, emergency services were called. Police cars soon filled the quiet street. Officers moved quickly through the house while paramedics waited outside. Inside the living room, they discovered 34-year-old Daniel Carter lying on the floor. The scene around him told a disturbing story. A chair had been knocked over. A lamp had fallen and shattered on the floor. The coffee table had been pushed aside as if someone had tried to escape during a violent struggle. It was clear that something terrible had happened inside that house. Detectives soon arrived and began examining the scene carefully. At first glance, the case appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. But the deeper they looked, the more confusing the situation became. Nothing appeared to be missing. The television was still mounted on the wall. Daniel's laptop was sitting untouched on his desk. Even his wallet, containing cash and credit cards, was lying on the kitchen counter. If this had been a robbery, why had nothing been taken? Detectives began interviewing neighbors. Most of them described Daniel the same way. Quiet, friendly, hardworking. He worked as a financial analyst and mostly kept to himself. He had a small circle of friends and no known conflicts with anyone. There were no signs that he had been involved in dangerous activities. To investigators, the case quickly turned into a mystery. They searched the house carefully for fingerprints, DNA, or any evidence that might point to a suspect. But the crime scene offered very little. Days passed. Detectives checked Daniel's phone records, emails, and bank transactions. They spoke with coworkers and friends. Yet every lead seemed to lead nowhere. Weeks went by, and the case began to lose momentum. For the community, the uncertainty was terrifying. The idea that someone capable of such violence might still be out there left everyone feeling uneasy. But one detective working the case refused to give up. Late one evening, he decided to review the original photographs taken at the crime scene. Sometimes, details that appear unimportant during the initial investigation can reveal something new when seen from a different perspective. As he slowly examined each photo, one image caught his attention. It showed the broken glass near the kitchen entrance. At first, it seemed like an ordinary detail from the struggle that had taken place in the room. But when the detective zoomed in closer, he noticed something unusual lying beside the broken glass. A small, dark object. He leaned closer to the screen. It was a button. A single clothing button lying on the floor. At first, this might not seem significant. Buttons fall off clothing all the time. But when investigators checked Daniel's clothing, they found something interesting. Every button on his shirt was still intact, which meant the button didn't belong to him. It belonged to someone else. Someone who had been inside that room during the struggle. The discovery immediately reopened the investigation. The button was sent to forensic analysts, who determined it came from a specific type of winter coat. Detectives then began examining security footage from nearby houses and traffic cameras in the area. Hours of video were reviewed. Finally, they noticed something suspicious. Late on the night before the crime was discovered, A dark sedan had driven slowly through the neighborhood before stopping near Daniel's house. After running the license plate, investigators identified the owner of the car. His name was Ryan Holt. Ryan had once worked with Daniel several years earlier. When detectives contacted Ryan, he seemed surprised to hear from them. He told investigators he had not seen Daniel in a long time. According to him, the two had simply drifted apart after leaving the same company. But something about his story didn't sit right with detectives. Security footage showed his car had been in the neighborhood for nearly 30 minutes that night. Eventually, detectives asked Ryan to come in for questioning. When he arrived, he appeared calm and confident. He repeated the same story. He had simply driven through the area and never stopped. But investigators had something he didn't expect: the button. During the interview, detectives noticed Ryan was wearing a dark winter jacket, and there was something strange about it. One of the buttons was missing. When the detectives quietly placed the recovered button on the table, Ryan's expression changed. The room fell silent. At that moment, he realized the investigation had reached the truth. For several minutes, he tried to maintain his story, but the evidence was too strong. Eventually, Ryan admitted what had really happened. Months earlier, he had borrowed a large amount of money from Daniel during a difficult financial situation. When Daniel recently demanded the money back, tensions began to rise between them. On the night of the incident, Ryan went to Daniel's house hoping to convince him to give him more time. But the conversation quickly turned into an argument. Voices were raised. Emotions escalated. What started as a heated discussion soon turned into a violent struggle. In the chaos, Ryan's jacket tore, and one of the buttons fell to the floor. In the panic that followed, he fled the house, believing he had left no trace behind. But that tiny detail would eventually expose the entire truth. Ryan Holt was later arrested and charged with murder. In court, the evidence presented by investigators made the outcome inevitable. For the people living on Maple Street, the case became a chilling reminder of how quickly life can change. And for detectives, it proved something they had always known. Sometimes the most important clues are the ones that seem the smallest. A single overlooked detail, a tiny piece of evidence, a button lying quietly on the floor. And in the end, that one clue exposed the killer. This is the Crime Chronicle,